Okay, guys. So last time we saw each other, or in the last recording, we ended with the group of amphibians. Remember that we are in the phylum Chordata here, the chordates, and never forget what are the common denominators that all the animals that belong to this phylum present. These are very important points that you need to know very well for me. Remember, the name chordates or chordata comes from corda, cuerda, which means rope. So what really names this group is this structure, which is a rope-like structure, which is present from embryonic development on, and it may not become a spine. So this is called notochord. Okay, we talked about it. It supports the body. The other three elements which are common to all the chordata or chordates are a nerve cord, which forms the nervous system. This nerve cord is dorsal to the notochord and is hollow. Okay. The other two elements are the pharyngeal slits or gill openings, as well as a post-anal tail. All these elements are represented here in this picture. So, first of all, a notochord here in red, the hollow dorsal nerve cord, which is dorsal to the notochord, the post-anal tail, and the pharyngeal pouches. Okay, these are the chordate features that you must know very well. For me, we did talk about those for a long time in the previous lectures. Remember that there are invertebrate chordates where this notochord never becomes bone or mineralized, okay? And then there are the groups of the vertebrate chordates, okay, shown here. We went through all these groups and we highlighted the main features, main characteristics. We ended up again last time with amphibians, okay? So never forget what are the trends in the evolution of the vertebrates. We talked about this. We just understood what is that passage between aquatic and terrestrial life. We talked about this lungfish group that starting getting out of the water and starting converting that gas bladder into a lung. Okay, this group of fish also had lobe fins, and this was important. The lobe fin is what later on becomes a limb. Okay, we talked about evolution of jaws as well. This comes early on. Remember, in sharks already we saw jaws and cartilaginous fishes. The fins evolve into limbs, and we see this with amphibians. And we see that gills don't become lung. It's the respiration that goes from a gill respiration to a lung respiration. Remember, the lungs come from that gas bladder. We talked about all these, and there are all the slides in the previous lecture, okay? But we go from a respiration through gills to respiration through lungs, okay? So we here, we also have to understand what happens in the circulation. So we talked about respiration or about heart circulation. We looked at the heart in fish already. The heart is very simple, only two chambers, a ventricle and an atrium, and one directional, unidirectional blood circulation. We already talked about this. And I already told you, anticipated to you that in mammals and in birds actually as well, the heart becomes much more complex. It's represented here, and it's almost like two hearts that work in parallel, where there is a unoxygenated or deoxygenated circulation and oxygenated circulation. They never mix with one another. Whereas you see that in other types of heart, more primitive hearts, there is some commistio, say Latins, means mixture of blood. Now, from the heart in fish to the heart in mammals. There is an intermediate form of heart, let's say, which is a three-chambered heart, which is typical of amphibians. And as you see here, okay, there are three chambers, and the problem with this heart is that it's definitely a good heart. It's better than a fish heart. There is some kind of separation, let's say, between the two circulations already of unoxygenated and oxygenated blood, but it's not a complete separation, and there is a little bit of mixture of unoxygenated and oxygenated blood here. It becomes a little bit better in reptiles, but it becomes really good in mammals and birds as well. This is the heart, typical heart, two-chambered, almost two separate hearts that work in parallel next to one another. So this is what I want you to remember about, excuse me, about heart evolution and how the heart evolves. Okay. All right, so we talked about all these groups up to amphibians. We're going to talk about reptile and mammals in this lecture. What is a reptile? A reptile is an air-breathing vertebrate, not new. Amphibians were already air-breathing, and is still ectothermic, still nothing new in that regard. Has a skin covered in scales. And here is the very good novelty that you must remember for me. A reptile is going to produce a shelled egg. There was no shelled egg in amphibians. In fact, remember, one of the reasons why amphibians have to live very close to a water body is because of reproduction, because they lay these eggs which may or may not be already fertilized. They only have a very thin jelly coat, and they can dehydrate in a matter of a few minutes. So a shelled egg is a characteristic, a feature that guarantees that now reproduction may happen away from a water body. Okay, so a little bit of history. Reptiles, of course, arose from amphibians. This was about 350 million years ago. And reptiles definitely have many adaptations. They've evolved many adaptations that allow them to become fully terrestrial, 100%. They don't need to stay very close to a body of water. And these adaptations are listed here. Shelled egg, I'm going to talk about this first, which is known as amniotic egg. You need to remember this word for me, amniotic egg, which is an embryo, which is an egg that contains an embryo. And the egg has a sac inside of it. Besides the shell, there is a sac. And we will see what this sac is called and what's inside this sac. Amniotic egg is also the type of, if you will, the type of egg that we produce as even as humans. I'll show you that we still have that amniotic membrane associated to our developing embryo. I'll show you in the next slide. So the amniotic egg, the shelled egg, is definitely the novelty that allows reptiles to move away from water. But there are also other characteristics that they evolve in parallel. For instance, a scaly skin. Scales are made of keratin, which is the same exact protein of which our hair is made. And see, keratin, so keratin is protein that appears here, and it's the same exact protein that also forms the feathers of birds, as well as the hair in mammals. So it's just here, if you will, are modification of scales from reptiles. Internal fertilization is another very important feature. Of course, if I don't live in a body of water where I can release my gametes, internal fertilization is a must. So internal fertilization guarantees the perpetuation of the species, and a shelled amniotic egg guarantees that the embryo can develop now away from water. The other characteristic that reptiles evolve is also water conserving kidneys. They can conserve a lot of water, and again, that's important because if you stay away for many hours from a body of water, then it's a very important feature to carry. All right, so let's look at amniotic egg. This is extremely important. You must know kind of like this configuration, what an amniotic egg consists of. Of course, in the amniotic egg, which is a shelled egg, you have a shell, okay, which is hard. Inside of it, you will find the embryo. And here is the thing. So we learned that amphibians, the developing embryo in amphibians must develop in water, right? And so the embryo itself is develops in water. Here, in reality, here nothing changes in that regard, but instead of the embryo going into the water, here is the water body that goes into the egg, because all around the body of the developing embryo, I'm highlighting it here, you see water. And so there is a membrane here that maintains that water constantly surrounding the embryo. And this membrane is called amnion, okay? So you have an embryo surrounded by water, and the water is maintained thanks to the presence of this pretty resistant membrane known as amnion. And there is something that we say when a woman is about to give birth. If you have ever heard, we say that the water broke, right? And guess what? Our embryos, when they develop, they have the exact same situation. A human embryo is surrounded by water and the amnion. So whenever an embryo or whenever a baby is ready to be born, basically the amnion will break and all the water that surrounds the developing embryo comes out. That's why we say that the water broke. Okay, so this amnion and the watery solution, we call it water. In reality, there are also minerals in here, but it's pretty much 99% water. This watery solution is called amniotic fluid, and the membrane is called amnion. Okay, this is developing embryo. So that amnion and the amniotic fluid contained in the amniotic cavity are the real novelty that allows now this embryo to develop away from a body of water, because the body of water is inside now the egg. Okay, so it's the body of water goes inside the egg. What a smart solution to develop away from water. And so the other elements here, remember, this is a shelled egg, it gets deposited. So in order for the embryo to develop, it needs to have all the nutrients already available inside this chamber. And all these nutrients are in the yolk, okay? So as the embryo develops, the yolk, the nutrients in the yolk get, of course, they represent the building blocks for the developing embryo, so it gets used up. And then there are other layers here of protection of the embryo and nutrition as well. Yeah, this is what we find in an egg, in a chicken egg, the yolk, when we open it up. But we find also another very watery, gelatinous material here, okay, which is the sorry, here, the albumen, okay. So the egg white is here, and the red part of the egg is here, the yolk. These are all nutritions and protective layers as well. And then we see a hard shell, which is very porous. Actually, if you look very carefully at an egg, you'll see the pores. Remember, there has to be oxygen exchange here, and this oxygen exchange happens through those pores. Now, this type of egg, amniotic egg, is the exact same type of egg that we will see in birds. So if you remember all these and study all these parts of an amniotic egg for reptiles, they're nothing else than the same that we'll find in birds. And in a way, you're already familiar with this type of egg, because this is the type of egg that we feed ourselves on, the bird egg. Okay, so moving on. Reptiles underwent an adaptive radiation and produced many groups. And the reason why reptiles underwent a radiation, which is an explosion of species, is because this was the first group of animals to really conquest the inner land. So when they arrived to the inner land, they didn't have any predators. There was nobody there basically before them, and they had lots of resources available. When a situation like that presents, you have an explosion of species. The group becomes very successful. We call that explosion of species adaptive radiation. So many lineages of reptiles evolved for this reason. And there are extinct groups that we recognize. And some of them you know very well. These are the dinosaurs, okay, dinosaur groups that are all extinct. The living reptile groups are crocodilians, turtles, snakes, and lizards. Just briefly, you know who all these are. They're represented here, okay? Crocodilians are actually the closest living relative of birds, believe it or not. They're all carnivores. They're still, this is a group that spends much of their time in water. Remember that the general trend here is to go to the inner land and get away from bodies of water, but there are always going to be exceptions, okay? Turtles and tortoises have a bony shell attached to their skeleton, have a beak rather than teeth. Some feed on plants, other are predators, different species here. Lizards and snakes are the largest group, and all snakes are carnivores, and they have highly movable jaws. These are mostly like interesting facts rather than anything else. So remember that reptile skin is protected. It's kind of like waterproof, and it is a tight seal that avoids dehydration. Remember, amphibians had very thin skin, and it was coated with some kind of gelatinous material there, some mucus that they produce, but that is not very protective. They still cannot be away from water for a long time. Here you have a seal. The scales are made of this keratin protein, as I told you, which is the same protein that makes the hair of our body, or mammalian in general, and as well as the feather of birds. And here is the key again, for an adult reptile to stay away from water, avoiding dehydration to their skin because of the presence of this very tight seal made of keratin. So that's a very important feature to remember. All right. So this is a different phylogenetic tree that I'm showing you from what I've been showing so far, because in our phylogenetic tree, the one that we have been watching so far, birds are not contemplated. And the reason why they're not contemplated is because birds are really a branch off from reptiles, okay? Whereas mammals, they are different independent lineage that comes, evolves from a primitive reptile that is now extinct, which gave rise to the reptile lineage and the mammal lineage. Okay, so we're gonna look briefly at birds as a branch off from reptiles. What is a bird? A bird is a winged, bipedal, endothermic, hard shell egg laying vertebrate. So is winged, this is a novelty, and is endothermic. This is a novelty compared to reptiles. There is no novelty in hard shell egg. We already described this hard shell egg, and it's identical to the egg of reptiles. But endothermy is a novelty of birds. Birds present feathers rather than scales and a toothless beak. So remember, the novelty here is being endothermic. And being endothermic, which is refers to the capability of maintaining the internal body temperature constant, is an important feature because birds need a lot of energy for flight. So birds, again, arose from a reptilian dinosaur ancestor. The closest living group of birds is, as I said, crocodiles, but they arose from a dinosaur ancestor. A dinosaur ancestor, we think it was feathered, okay? And again, the limbs here, the forelimbs evolved into wings, okay? Regarding the shelled egg of birds, as I told you, they're nothing different than the shelled egg of a reptile. Same exact features. This is the embryo, developing embryo. You have the yolk, which represents the nutrients on which the embryo develops. You have a chamber around that surrounds the embryo that is filled with 99% water and minerals. This is the amniotic liquid. This is something that also human embryo present, but human embryo does not have a hard shell, of course, but it does have amniotic liquid and the membrane that encloses and maintains this liquid always intact, that you don't want it to break for any reason, that maintains basically a little lake, a little bit body of water around the embryo at any given time, okay? That is known as amnion, okay? The membrane is amnion, okay? And we saw that in a previous representation. All right? Same exact type of egg. So not much novelty there, okay? The novelty here really is the endothermy, okay? Well, I should say also the other novelty is a fully developed four-chambered heart, because in reptile, the four-chambered heart is almost there. It's not there, it's almost there, okay? Birds really have a four-chambered heart just like ours with a double circulation. We'll see that in a minute. They also have very highly efficient respiratory system. That's important because they need to produce a lot of energy for flight. they present lightweight bones full of holes, basically, to make um, the bone system lighter again for flight. Very powerful muscles that attach to the keel. And just want to spend a minute on the circulation here in birds. This is the same exact circulation that we present. Is a double circulation where unoxygenated and oxygenated blood are completely 100% separated at any given time. And so it's a four-chambered heart. And the double circulation refers to the systemic circulation versus the pulmonary circulation. So the unoxygenated blood is sent to the lungs to get oxygenated, of course, and from there goes to the systemic circulation, and the blood from systemic circulation comes back to the heart to be pumped, and it's going to be blue, of course, unoxygenated again to the lungs. So it's a complete separation of oxygenated and or deoxygenated blood, which makes it very efficient, a very efficient machine here. There is a lot of teeth diversity, big diversity in birds. There is absence of teeth, but a lot of big diversity and adaptation to the big shape and hardness presents adaptation to the different type of food on which all the different species feed on. There is also a lot of feed diversity, again, to walk on different types of substrates. Bird feathers are, as I told you, made of keratin. They're pretty much modified scales. They're reptile scales that have been modified over time because of adaptation to flight. Okay, they're made of keratin, same protein of which reptile scales are made of. Okay, there are different type of bird feathers. The down feathers, which are the ones that we use a lot for keeping our coats very warm. They are very waterproof. They give a lot of warmth. Okay, and then there are primary and secondary feathers as well. Okay, don't worry about too many details about that. All right, so the last group we're going to look at is the group of mammals, which is the group to which we belong. What is a mammal? A mammal is an air-breathing vertebrate, nothing new, that has body hair, this is new, milk-producing mammary glands. Of course, just the females, as you know. So this is a real distinctive factor of mammals, okay? Because some mammals, as you know, don't have hair. The ones that are adapted to live in the ocean, they went back to live in the ocean. So most of mammals have body hair, but not all. But all mammals produce milk, okay? So this is the real distinctive factor of mammals. Mammals also have distinctive teeth and typically give birth to live young, meaning typically they don't deposit eggs, typically because there are mammals that do deposit egg. Okay, we're going to talk about this group shortly. All right, so what is mammalian origins? Mammals arose about 200 million years ago, and they arose from a reptile-like ancestor, okay? And mammals underwent adaptive radiation about not right away. So they arose about 200 million years ago, but it took millions of years to underwent adaptive radiation. And the reason why it took so long to underwent an adaptive radiation, an explosion of species, is that until the big reptiles went extinct, mammals had to hide. They couldn't even come out in the sunlight. In fact, mammals were initially nocturnal little creatures. They were subject to a lot of predation by big reptiles. But as you know, big reptiles went extinct in a mass extinction event about 65 million years ago, and only after that they underwent, mammals underwent adaptive radiation. This is the schematic representation of three middle ear bone of mammals here instead of only one. So mammals developed a more sophisticated type of ear to hear better, and so this is helpful, right, against predators. Don't worry too much about the details of the ear, okay, just more sophisticated. They adapted they also present teeth adaptation with many types of teeth adapted to chew on many different type of food, okay. All right, so looking at the evolutionary tree of mammals, okay, maybe don't worry about this diagram, it's a little confusing. There are three groups of, three lineages of mammals that you must remember for me, okay? The first one is monotremes, which are egg-laying mammals. If you didn't know, there are mammals that lay eggs. We're going to talk about them. Most of you already know this. Second group, which is the marsupials. Definitely all of you know this. All of you know the existence of kangaroos in mostly in Australia, right? These are the pouch mammals, which have an external placenta. And the third group is the group of placentas, which present an internal placenta. Okay, and this is the group where we belong. Okay, let's look at monotremes. There are only 3 species of living monotremes, so egg-laying mammals, duck-billed platypus, and 2 species of spiny anteaters. Okay, platypus. Here is a picture of the youngs that are trying to find the milk, because these animals don't have nipples, so the youngs have to constantly lick an area around here from which really the milk comes as almost as a sweat. Okay, so they're constantly licking these areas where the milk oozes onto the skin. They manage to grow very well this way. It's a lot of work though. Okay, so this is still living group. Okay, this group lays eggs. Okay, there are egg-laying mammals in this world. This is the echidna. This is an anteater. Okay, again, egg-laying mammal. Marsupials. They are mostly found in Australia, although their history doesn't. It shows that they actually originated in Asia, and we will talk about that later on. But they ended up in Australia and ended up disappearing from most of the other places where they went through. And they nowadays, most of the species are present in Australia and the nearby islands as well. The only marsupial present in North America is the opossum. So what is the distinction here? What is special about marsupials that makes them belong to a different lineage? Marsupials are born in an undeveloped state and complete the development in a permanent pouch on the mother. They are born, it's incredible if you have never seen an just born marsupial. It's nothing else than a very, very small and a fragile embryo, very undeveloped, no eyes, just barely has limbs. And I have a video that I invite you to watch. It's an amazing video of how that shows how a marsupial is born. Okay, so these are pictures of marsupial mammals. You know them: opossum, kangaroo, koala, wallaby, Even the Tasmanian devil is a marsupial. Okay, koalas are marsupial as well. This is this is the video of that shows the journey that this newborn. This is a marsupial that is being born and takes a journey towards the mother's pouch. It only has a few minutes to get to the pouch. It's amazing. See, the eyes are not there. It uses the sense of smell to find the pouch from the site of birth, of course, and it's very, very fragile. If it stays out for more than a few minutes, doesn't reach the pouch, it's dead because the skin is very, very thin. So watch this video, okay? It's a very nice video that shows all this journey. I'm not going to play it for practical reasons, and I'm going to move on. So, placental mammals. In the placental mammals, which is a group to which we belong, so this is easier probably to understand and remember for you. The young develops in the mother's uterus, and there is a real organ that develops here. If you will, you can compare placenta to an egg yolk. The difference here is that the placenta is an organ that contains both blood vessels from the mother and the developing embryo. The nutrients are constantly transmitted from the mother to the embryo. It's not a reservoir, placenta is not a reservoir of nutrients like the yolk. It's just an organ which is highly vascularized, and here there is a constant exchange of nutrients from the mother's body to the fetus, the developing fetus. Okay, and of course oxygen needs to be delivered at any given time to the fetus as well. In general, placental mammals develop more quickly than marsupials because there is a direct exchange of nutrients. If you watch the video of the journey of newborn marsupial to the pouch, you'll see that as soon as this little embryo, it's really an embryo, it reaches the pouch, it latches onto the nipple and it starts getting feeding on milk right away. Watch the video, please. It's a very nice video. All right, so this is a picture of placenta, okay? And later on, we'll talk about primates in this course. So primates is an order of placental mammals to which we belong, actually. These are some of the characteristics of primates. 5 digits on the limbs with an opposable thumb. Eye orbits enclosed in bone, tends towards reduced snout and flattened face. Stereoscopic vision, which is a procession of depth and three-dimensional structures. Tend towards holding the torso upright, large brain compared to body size. We'll talk about all these much more in detail when we talk about primates. Don't actually worry too much about remembering these things right now. Okay, I have this slide here just to introduce, but we'll talk about primates at the very end, actually last lecture, when we talk about hominidae evolution. Okay, again, don't worry too much about these final slides, okay? Just wanted to point out again the evolution of the heart. We have talked about this many times, which means it's very important to me. So we go from a fish heart with a single circulation to bird and mammal heart with a double circulation, very efficient machine, complete separation of unoxygenated and oxygenated blood. This is again another picture, more complete, of the human circulatory system, where you see that unoxygenated blood, there is a pulmonary circulation. Unoxygenated blood goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, and gets back to the heart, gets pumped to the systemic capillaries, where all the cells are going to uptake the oxygen, and then it gets back to the heart to be pumped again to the lungs. So double circulation, complete separation of oxygenated and unoxygenated blood. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the human respiratory system, very briefly, which is composed of many parts, but the actual exchange of oxygen happens in little sacs here, known as alveoli, which are in the lungs. Remember that big sac, initial big sac, which is the gas bladder. Now it's kind of subdivided in many little sacs here, so it becomes very ramified basically. And these little sacs are called alveoli, okay? And that's where the gas exchange happens. Now there are airways, okay, from the nasal cavities to pharynx, larynx, and trachea and bronchi that then ramify in the smaller sections known as bronchioles. So bronchi are the two big sections, and bronchioles are the smaller ramified ones. They terminate into alveoli, where the gas exchange happens. This gas exchange is very typically very efficient. Here is a picture, an enlargement of an alveolus, singular alveolus, plural alveoli, okay, where the gas exchange happens. Remember, not only oxygen is uptaken, CO2 is released. CO2 is a product of animal metabolism. It needs to be released at any given time during respiration, during metabolism. And I have a video here that shows the gas exchange that happens at the alveoli, in the alveoli, okay, where the blood here shows you how the oxygen is efficiently uptaken from the air that gets into the alveoli into the red blood cells that circulate here, the capillaries that irrorate and surround alveoli. Watch the video, it's nice. It's a nice video again about how that shows you how respiration works. Okay, how exchange of gas happens in basically in our body. Okay, if you fill with these alveoli with liquid, gas exchange cannot happen efficiently. This is what is happening to some people that are affected by coronavirus, where basically there is a pulmonary in course. In the severe cases where the alveoli get filled with liquid, and therefore these people end up literally almost having the same experience as drowning. They drown because the alveoli get filled with a liquid that gets produced from the cells of their own body. Okay, and this is an abnormal reaction of the human body, kind of like an exaggerated reaction of the human body, which in order to respond and to combat the virus, it's actually harming itself. I wanted to also point out that they're working on a medication, using a medication which is actually an anti-arthritic rheumatoid medication that seems to stop this massive reaction of release of liquid in the alveoli, and it actually has been working on some patients that were intubated because of the virus. Now they've been able to remove them off the ventilators, the machines, by giving this medication that avoids the body response, a massive, it's called a cytokine storm that our body produces in response to viral infection, which is kind of like interesting to know this. But what I have heard is that people that are experiencing the pulmonite upon COVID-19, they die just like they were drowning. It's kind of like very, very scary. All right, so we are done with this lecture, and I will then stop here. If you want to watch some mammal videos, these are optional. Okay, the ones that I really invite you to watch are the one about alveoli, the exchange of oxygen and CO2 in the alveoli, as well as the one about marsupials. It's very, very nice video here. The little journey here. It's a very nice video. Please watch it, and I will talk to you in the next lecture. Thank you.